Hi, did you ever have anyone read to you? That was one of the best experiences of my life. I remember my mom reading to me. Did you have a mom or a dad or a grandma or grandpa that read to you? If not, you're missing something. And I'd like to be your grandma and read to you, your YouTube grandma. That's one of the best things, especially before you go to sleep. And I'm going to read the Bible, my favorite book. And I'm going to read my version. I wrote this, and this is episode 1. It's the story. It isn't on the surface. I've put together all the little pieces in Scripture that give an idea of what was going on before we were created. It's quite an interesting story, and I'll be happy to read to you. This is going to be the introduction, and I'm in my garden, so there might be some outside noises now and again. This is the historical introduction, the real Holy War. A small leathery man bent over a piece of papyrus, totally absorbed in his writing. A strand of thin white hair fell down over his face, but he seemed not to notice as his quill scratched the animal skin. Occasionally he would sit back as though seeing things somewhere else, and then write again. The place was Patmos, a rocky island off the coast of Asia Minor, a place where political enemies were exiled or sent to labor in the mines. The year was shortly before 96 AD, when Nerva became emperor of Rome and released Domitian's prisoners. The man was John, probably Jesus' closest friend, by now an old man. It isn't known whether he was forced to work or if he was just considered politically dangerous to the emperor. Domitian had declared himself a god and was demanding sacrifices and worship from his citizens. Scary. Since John would not comply and had encouraged others not to, and since he was recognized as the leader of the new Christian sect, Domitian had exiled him to Patmos. He was writing what he called the Apocalypse. You may have heard of it called Revelation. Of particular interest to us is what he was seeing, the trial of God. God is on trial? Yes, and everyone in the universe is excited, except us, that is. In the middle of his revelation, John describes an angel flying to our world to announce never-ending good news to every single person on every single continent in the whole world. And the essence of his crucial information is that it's time for God's trial to begin. He calls to invite our participation. Reverence God, he says, and give your passion to the one who made you, the heavens, the earth, and the seas. Give him your allegiance, for it is time for him to be judged. Finally, everything will get straightened out again. God will be vindicated as good, and evil condemned. But how could anyone put God on trial? He has put himself on trial before the whole universe because he's been charged with being unfit to rule. He has been accused of being selfish and severe, arbitrary, requiring unselfishness when he won't exercise self-denial. But who would do that? The most beautiful, gifted creature God made. But why? Because he could. But why would a perfect creature choose evil? It happened gradually, over time. His emotions and his thoughts became absorbed and then corrupted with the idea that he could be God. This is my imagination of the events that are hinted at in Scripture. I'm going to skip over the preface, except just to say that we are joining them far into this process. It is my educated belief that our universe, with its countless galaxies, worlds, and inhabitants, has already been created Genesis 2:1 repeats it 4 times. So, the prologue. This gives you the idea of what is going on, so when I start chapter 1, you're not lost. Once upon a time, there were 3 kings, gods, who were completely committed to each other because of their commitment to love as a governing principle. They understood that if all of life was configured to give, only then could energy be maintained indefinitely. They called their agreement the law of life, or the way of love, and realized that it required beings who could choose, because love loves to give, but love is only real if it's chosen. So they created beings who were perfect, knowing only good and delighting in love, but with the freedom to think and question, reason and decide. The gods knew that at some point they would be challenged on their commitments, and so it happened. Ironically, the one given the most decided he didn't have enough. He wanted to be a god. This happened long before us, and the story that follows is how God chose to handle it. In the beginning was God. There isn't much more information than that, which is how Genesis 1:1 starts, except the Judeo-Christian account of beginnings uses Elohim in the Hebrew, a plural noun, for God, and the Quran uses unity, also a plural noun. Trying to understand, I came up with seeing God as an office, filled by 3 persons, God being one position, filled by more than one being. That's the introduction. Join me next time for Chapter 1, the story behind our story.